How you doing?
Hey man, how's it going?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm in the best place I can be, in a
Right.
studio and in the countryside where I made the last two records pretty much. Well, the Brief Inquiry, so I'm very
Yeah.
comfortable here.
How does it feel to have this album finally be coming out? Because this must have felt like the longest album cycle ever.
Yeah, it has been a long time, but I kind of was prepared for that at least. There's a lot of talk of why the album got pushed back and all these kind of things. It's kind of irrelevant. Like the premise of my idea was always really to just continuously to have a real time expression. That's the thing I've been saying, like real time expression, to continuously release music over two cycles in the way that you would kind of in one. So, and that's what I did. I put out an album, and then 7 months later, I put out People and Greta, and then have continued to put out music pretty much every month since then. So that was the plan. Where the album fell in that plan was, it changed just because I was constantly this is our fucking best album. I don't give a fuck if Reddit are gonna cry. Do you know what I mean?
No, totally. Yeah. How did the fact that it was a continuing process impact what your idea of what the album was going to be?
It was always going to be just a series of captured moments. There was no material really that existed from before. So it's pretty much all been written in this time. And it's very reactive to the time. People is quite a literal example of that.
Yeah.
The thing is with that record, when A Brief Inquiry came out, it was a big deal or whatever. Or it was especially a big deal for us, on the level of what we'd experienced before. And I suppose in that situation, you can kind of look back and react to what's happening, all this shit that people are talking, and praise that you're getting. And you can make this record that you've said you're going to do with that in mind. And you can be a big band, be the band that's going to fucking headline Glasgow or whatever. Or you go home, essentially. You just thanks, but we love just making records, and that's what we're going to keep doing. And if we think too much about this, we're going to make music that isn't sincere. So that was the original idea. Let's make an emo garage record. Fuck it. Not fuck the system, but what do we want to do? We don't have a formula for what we do. Let's not pretend that we did. Let's not be oh, you like that? We can do that loads, because we fucking can't. We don't know what we're doing. So when that started to work, fuck it, let's do what we want and make what we want. And then we were fuck, we're making our best record. Then putting the album back and stuff like that just didn't, I wasn't worried about when it was going to end, because I knew it would just have a natural conclusion, when it was all out.
Totally. And I feel you hear those continual threads throughout the album. And I'm really intrigued by how it kind of blurs the line between these explicit calls to action and that dreamy pop escapism.
Yeah. We put out People and Greta, and everyone's it's going to be the environmental record. And I'm kind of a bit it's not going to be a one dynamic record, because that's not why I do this. I'm not even a single artist. I can do singles because I do it by accident, but it's part of this long form expression where I'm trying to get everything out. So it is a record about the environment, but it's a record about me, what I'm scared of, what excites me, what turns me on. I'm always trying to figure out who I am, the search for the definitive self. Why am I this walking set of contradictions when I believe that I'm actually this? Why am I not essentially me? But escapism for me as part of the whole thing of what I do is really important. I don't want Love It If We Made It and I Like America and People and stuff like that if there isn't moments of escapism, because kind of what I'm talking about is all these ideas are about escapism. Love, sex, drugs, religion. They're just forms of losing yourself. They're just forms of relinquishing responsibility in the moment, right? And I think that I talk about that a lot, those ideas a lot. So I want to deliver those ideas at times as well. I do want moments where it's quite transcendent and people are delivered to another place that isn't the place where I want them to be when I want them to, it's escapism as an excuse for not saying something. That new song, if you're too shy, let me know. I was really conflicted about that song because it's not fucking hallelujah. It's not fucking pain. And I think that I'm so focused a lot of the time on getting those things out that like, it's not that I find that shit easy, but that shit comes kind of quite easy to me, like that 80s dancey pop, like 1970 kind of 5y kind of thing. Like I do that shit for like fun. I feel like I don't have to dig very deep. And because like I genuinely believe like the things that you want to leave out are probably the things that you should put in any art. Like there's not that many bits that I want to leave out.
Right. Everything feels intentional, you know, like the ambience is intentional. The escapism is intentional. The calls to action, like you mentioned that you make records like this to kind of try to define yourself. And I'm curious, like, what did you learn about who like the real Matty is from this kind of undulating experience?
Lots of things, you know, like, you know, it's hard for me because I've kind of backed myself into a corner a little bit where I've kind of been like, tell the truth, then you don't have to worry about what you say because you're never going to be contradicting yourself. But I think as I'm getting older, the shit that I'm revealing in myself, you know, like when I'm fucking making Love Me or 22 and you ask me what I'm revealing, oh, I'm led by my ego. Like I'm conflicted by being famous. Like these revelations are fine. Like I'm 31 years old now. The shit that I'm learning about myself now is not like shiny and kind of endearing and charming. Do you know what I mean? It's fucking raw. Do you know what I mean? And I think that like now I'm getting to a position where it almost feels like unhealthy for me to answer your question, like what have I truly learned about myself? Like, do you know what I mean? Stuff that I need to figure out before I start talking about it in public, basically.
That's fair. Yeah, I was thinking about that on the song Nothing Revealed, Everything Denied. It's like, how do you kind of negotiate how much of yourself that you reveal? And not just to like the music, but like in your life, how much do you reveal of yourself? Has there ever been a moment with this album specifically where you like wrote down a lyric and were just like, no, I'm not sharing that?
No, that's the rule. You can't do that. If it gets into lyric territory where I'm like comfortable enough to physically write it down and reflect upon it, then no. Like, cause it's like, what I've learned just through experience is that you can't figure out really scientifically how to do what you do if the game that you're in is in like emotions. I am quite into the demystification of these processes because that's what I do. I feel something, I have a set of words, something comes to my mind, I write it down, then that's the core of it. Then you're a songwriter. That's when the writing comes in. Some people are better than others. And you turn those ideas and you try and convey big ideas in small words, or you try and convey small ideas across a long thing. That's craft. But like, you know, like where the stuff comes from is very like, it's just about trusting your instinct and kind of writing it down and going with that.
Yeah, totally. For the past 3 records, you've had songs about America, and I'm curious this time around, like what has been fascinating you about America?
I've always found really America fascinating. To talk specifically about the record, the 2 things that are really on the record, because I think I've spoken about America at large quite a bit.
Right.
Jesus Christ 2005, that song, for example, was 2 songs. It was like the same piece of music, but I had a version of it that was just about Christian America and its oppression on kind of young and mainly young gay people and that whole world. And another version that was kind of about the prison industrial complex having a for-profit prison system. It was kind of these 2 individual songs. After a while, I just kind of Brian Geisen cut up techniqued the both of them and just chose my favorite, objectively my favorite lines, and then just made one song out of it. So it's kind of this like surrealist reflection on different things.
There's a lot of this album and, you know, how it's executed, not only like sonically, but aesthetically speaking, that kind of calls back to music that we kind of grew up on in like the Y2K, like late 90s era, where the album rollout could be huge and like flashy, and collectively we seem to be really interested in that moment in pop culture, like right now as a whole. And I'm curious like how you felt about that time and like how that plays into this record.
I mean, I grew up like albums were like my currency. So the form of consuming music as an album was something that I just completely took for granted. Like I never even thought about a different model, you know. So I would buy blank CDs, and my friend had just passed his driving test, and we would drive to HMV Trafford Centre, and we would buy like 6 CDs, and then we'd take them home, and then we'd burn them all, and then we'd take them back the next day and return them and be like, this one's scratched, this one's wrong, I got the wrong one from my sister. And then I'd get another 6 CDs and I'd take them home, and I'd do that every weekend, like 3 days in a row. And that's how I used to like get my music, essentially. And I think that my relationship with the consumption of music was so tactile and so real. A lot of the thing that you only ever had was like the album itself and the inlay and the sleeve. Like learning about where it was made, reading all the lyrics, like building all the relationship with that. When physical copies went away, after a while, people were like, no, I want to hold it. Like, you know, like I want it off the screen. I want to hold it again. I want a physical relationship with my consumption or my memories or whatever it is. And I think that we're constantly striving for tactility in all regards. And the thing that I talk about on this album a bit, I think, and on the last album in particular, is that we want to recreate tactility on the internet.
Definitely. And I feel like this is a really fascinating time, particularly to talk about this record, because it's a time when we're reckoning with what is frivolous and what is essential with regards to how we process music. And it was mentioned, I was listening to your interview with Annie Mac, which I thought was fantastic. And you mentioned how when the 1975 is eventually allowed to tour again, it's going to be a totally different situation, right? You're going to have to, you said you wanted to cut back on set design, and like, you know, there's like environmental things, there's like health concerns, there's all these different things that we have to consider now. But I'm curious, like, what should be saved? What do we need to be preserving, you know, going forward?
Ability for people to create. The ability for people to create, I think. I don't know what needs to be preserved for the likes of me, but I'm not a regular candidate. Like I haven't figured out live music yet. I don't know. What we can't do is keep trying to do what we all want to do, which is just our thing, tour the world, do the fucking big show, but just hope that we can like massage it enough for it to be socially acceptable. Like we can't do that anymore. Like we need to reinvent it. We, big players in music, need to reinvent it. I mean, so I think that what needs to be preserved on a social level, though, is people's ability to create art at whatever level and keeping music completely democratic. It's a requirement. Like limiting people's ability to do it through lack of funding or anything like that, or, you know, just social regressive ideas. Do you know what I mean? That's what's dangerous. You know, self-expression through art is the thing that needs to be saved the most.
Yeah, but I think it's really interesting how these ideas kind of coalesce. Like what you're talking about right now is absolutism is kind of has put us in this place where we are forced to be asked these existential questions with regards to everything. And I think that trickles down into this album, you know, coming from this era of pop absolutism. Now we're at this place of pop existentialism. What, like, how do you even go? Where do you go from there?
Well, it's difficult because pop culture is a thing, so it definitely has a life cycle. Like we've kind of lived like pop culture is just this never-ending set of circumstances. But I think that it's been spinning and kind of deconstructing and getting faster and faster and faster as it approaches the middle. And now we're kind of spinning quite fast, where like everything is a reference, everything is a knowing, everything is inherently postmodern. It's a very, very weird time to be kind of like authentic or whatever. And I think that you even look at it from like, I Like It When You Sleep to this record, like even in let's say the the trappings of culture, the superficial aspects of culture, like what it looks like, what it looked like on the internet in like 2016 was very filtered, very curated, people finding a lot of pink walls, people filtering themselves, doing all that kind of shit. And the idea was this curated sense of reality was the thing. Move only 2 years later, and almost the opposite of that is on vogue. So deconstruction, Billie Eilish, iPhone photos with no filter, like XXXTentacion talking to people on Instagram Live directly, Cardi B doing it. All these kind of real-time expressions became the kind of the trappings of the zeitgeist. And I think that, you know, it's this hyper meta deconstruction of culture that's happening at the moment. And yeah, this record is definitely kind of like a reaction to that to a certain extent, because you kind of can't avoid it.
Yeah, totally. Now that this album is like wrapped and done, I mean, a quote that I got from that interview with Annie, or like, pop music frees my spirit, but we're in a different place now. Like right now, where do you feel like you and the band are at?
It's like every time we make a record, we try and put everything into it, and then we hopefully do. So every time we get to the next record, it's not that there's less to draw from, it's just the stuff that you get to draw from is more fundamental. It's like fucking like the truth or the grit or the fucking, you know, the real shit. So I think that it happens to align with a time in our career where we're just not doing it for the sake of it. Do you know what I mean? We're doing it because we love it, and we've done it enough to know that it only really works when it has meaning, you know?
Yeah, totally. Well, this has been great. I really appreciate you always, you know, being down to have these conversations and to integrate them into your work, because I think that's really important. I think the endlessness of it is crucial. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Cheers, mate. Look after yourself in New York.
Yeah, you too, man.